The Big Lead, Dori Monson Show exclusive.
What I have been and will continue to spotlight is the effect that the House bill that went into effect statewide Sunday at midnight, House Bill 1310, and the companion bill as well. We're hearing all kinds of stories. I told you earlier about a woman in Kennewick over in the Tri-Cities. She came out with 2 kitchen knives. She was running at the police. They had to retreat. Now, ordinarily, they would have fired beanbags at her, but the legislation said you must use less lethal force like beanbags. And then elsewhere it said you cannot use a .50 caliber gun or larger. Well, guess what size gun fires beanbags? About a 37 millimeter, which is bigger than a .50 caliber. And so the police didn't have that option. So she slashed tires on the police cars. She started throwing dishes, broke her apartment window, threw dishes at the cops. Finally, when she crawled under a car, they were able to tase her. But they could have stopped all of that right in the bud if they could have just shot beanbags, which this new law prohibits from our cops. I talked yesterday with the Chelan County Sheriff. They had a man in a yellow dress who had just gotten out of Western State Hospital steal a yellow school bus, drive it across 2 counties. They had to break off the pursuit because of the new law. And up in Whatcom County, I've been hearing some stories of how this is affecting policing there. We got tons of great listeners in Whatcom County. My producer, Nicole, is from Whatcom County, and the sheriff there is Bill Elfo, who joins us live here on the Dori Monson Show. Sheriff, great to talk to you this afternoon.
Well, thank you for having me on.
Absolutely. Okay, you heard my introduction. Are you seeing, Sheriff, any examples of crime that has gone on too long because the tools have been taken away from you and all of the men and women who serve under you?
Well, we have, and these new laws are going to profoundly affect our officers and deputies' ability to detect and prevent crime, apprehend dangerous criminals, and frustrating the caretaking responsibilities that we've historically performed. And ultimately, it's going to make our communities less safe.
Do you think that was the intent? Because I actually am starting to believe, Sheriff, that is the intent of the Democrats in the legislature, certainly the ones who run the city of Seattle and much of King County government. I have seen what I believe is a pattern that's going to, just tear away at the fabric of our community. And I think they have this fantasy that once it's all torn down, then they can rebuild it in their socialist Marxist image. And I know that sounds extreme, but I can't believe that it's a coincidence that all these things are happening at once.
Well, Washington State is going to be unique among the 50 states in the restrictions they place on law enforcement. For example, Terry stops, or allowing an officer to stop someone less than the standard of probable cause on reasonable suspicion, and do a stop and frisk, investigate whether a crime has or has not occurred, and ultimately often develop probable cause to make an arrest and seize evidence. That's eliminated. We cannot do that any longer. We cannot use any degree of force to detain someone for an investigation. If someone flees from us in a vehicle, they could have committed an act of assaulting a law enforcement officer, which is a felony, an act of domestic violence, a burglary of your home. We cannot pursue them any longer unless pursuits are now limited to certain violent felonies, and that does not include the low-level felony assault cases.
Unbelievable. So here's the example I've been giving my listeners. If somebody's home has been broken into, maybe they're in the basement, and they hear a window upstairs get smashed, their home's been broken into, they call 911. As the police are responding, they see a guy running down the street. If the homeowner isn't there to say, that's the person who broke into my house, if the cops, they ordinarily, 6 days ago, they could have stopped that person and questioned them and see if they could, in the midst of that questioning, determine that they have probable cause. But now, you are not allowed to stop and question somebody who's running away from a suspected crime site. Is that correct?
That's correct, unless we have much higher standard of probable cause, and that'll make us unique among the 49 other states.
It's unbelievable.
We are currently the only state that I could find that's no longer going to allow this practice. And undoubtedly, many criminals will go free, and people will continue to be victimized.
I talked to a state rep a couple of days ago, on Monday, Roger Goodman, who's one of the big supporters of these new laws. And he said, like in the example of the bean bags, when I said, no, they're not allowed to do it. You prohibited the gun that shoots bean bags. And he goes, well, clearly the officers should know what the intent of the legislature is and go ahead and do it, essentially. I'm paraphrasing. But you guys can't run your lives by legislative intent. You have to run your lives by the letter of the law, don't you? Or otherwise, you're going to have some rogue attorney generals and governors coming after you.
Well, we operate under the plain meaning of the statute, which is pretty clear, and their intent in that statute is pretty clear as well. And it's in the case the example you provided, it eliminates any firearms above .50 caliber, which includes the 12-gauge police shotgun, which is our platform for delivering less lethal rounds, bean bags to avoid the use of deadly force. And it also it defines this equipment, regardless of how it was acquired, as military equipment, and directs that it be destroyed.
Jeez, this is insanity. I was born and raised here, Sheriff.
I just put in a supplemental budget request for $90,000 to equip our deputies with air guns as an alternative means for delivering less lethal when the 12-gauge shotgun has worked fine for us for years.
Fine, yeah. Do you have, before I let you go, do you have any real-life examples from the last 4 days of how this has affected you fighting crime?
Well, we have one. I'm still getting all the facts in on it, but we were called out to the Sumas area for an individual that was in a mental health crisis. His mother wanted him to get help. He said he wasn't willing to go, and we are now prohibited from using force unless we have probable cause to believe a crime has been committed or there's an imminent threat. So we could not use force to take him into custody under the Involuntary Treatment Act, and he went ahead and went on to cause problems in the neighborhood and produce a BB gun and threaten officers with it, and he was ultimately arrested. If we could have intervened earlier, we could have taken him to the mental hospital for treatment, and now he's caught up in the criminal justice system, which my understanding is what the legislature wanted to avoid in the first place, but they've put these rules on us and these parameters that are really limiting our ability to deal effectively with these situations that we have so well for decades.
Sure. Well, I'll give you real quick. I know I don't want to take all your time, but real quick, I'll give you one from my family from yesterday. My wife was down at the grocery store, and she saw a guy trying car handles, one car after another, and she goes, "Hey!" She yells at him, "What are you doing?" Police station is in the same parking lot. Our city's police station is in the same parking lot as our grocery store. And he started saying to my wife the sob story about how he needs a place to stay tonight, and can she help him with some money? And she goes, "Oh, you're in luck. The police department has resources that they will offer you. Do you want me to walk behind you and you can go over there right now?" He goes, No, but I need some food. She, "Oh, they'll get you food too." And then she called the police. Cop came out, good friend of mine, and he said he trespassed that guy a month ago from the same place for breaking into cars, and the guy resisted when he tried to grab him up, but he was able to use force a month ago. The same officer found the guy yesterday and said, "I don't have the option to use any force. Even though he was trespassing on a place where we gave him a trespass a month ago," he said, "all I could do was escort him off the property," where he undoubtedly went and victimized somebody else, broke into somebody else's car or home as soon as he got off the property. And I'm thinking, our legislature has created this, Sheriff. I mean, I'm just dumbfounded by all of this.
Yeah, these are pretty profound changes. And, our Association of Sheriffs and Police Chiefs and sheriffs and police chiefs individually inform the legislature as to what the results of the consequences and the ramifications of these new statutes were. And nonetheless, they were responsive to other voices and enacted them into law. And your officers are still going to do the best they can under the circumstances, but we have far less tools in our tool belt to deal with crime. And it's very frustrating for officers. We're seeing them, people that are now planning to retire early. We've had deputies already leave the agency. They don't want to take on this increased civil and criminal liability or a threat of losing their law enforcement officer certification for making a mistake.
Yeah.
So it has a lot of consequences. It's not just the statute you mentioned. There's a whole myriad of them, at least 17 major changes that are going to affect law enforcement in Washington State and community safety.
Yeah, making everything more dangerous. All right. Sheriff, it's great talk with you. I really appreciate you taking the time. Thanks for coming on with me today.
Thank you for having me.
My pleasure. The sheriff in Whatcom County, Bill Elfo, joining us. So again, I'm going to ask the question,